Before we dive into this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from.
Growing up, I lived solely with my mother. My father, a soldier by profession, was frequently away on duty. His work required him to travel constantly, and as a result, I seldom saw him. My mother took on the role of both parents, ensuring our home was always comfortable, peaceful, and loving. She was incredibly kind and caring, putting immense effort into keeping everything in order. Every detail mattered to her. She wanted to create a warm environment, and I could feel the love in every corner of our home. From time to time, my uncle would come by to visit us. He was my mother's brother, and he always felt like a natural extension of our family. His visits brought laughter and joy. He was gentle and humorous, always arriving with small gifts that made me smile and feel special. He had a way of making everything seem lighthearted and fun, effortlessly brightening our home. I felt like I could trust him completely. He was family, after all, someone I looked up to as a caring and supportive figure in my life. Now, at 20, I'm a university student, living what I thought was a relatively typical life. I had my studies, my family, and things generally felt steady and predictable. Life felt good. There were, of course, the usual ups and downs that came with being a young adult, but nothing had prepared me for what was about to happen. One day, after a long set of classes, I came home feeling especially drained. My body felt tired, heavy with the familiar symptoms of my monthly period, and I just wanted to rest. It was one of those days when you feel physically uncomfortable and emotionally tender. I wasn't expecting any visitors, but when I arrived, I found my uncle was there again. His presence was comforting. He was someone I trusted, someone who had been there throughout my life, making every visit feel familiar and warm. Seeing him, I didn't think twice when he offered to help me with some of my coursework. I thought it was kind of him. He sat down beside me on the couch, close enough that I could catch the scent of his cologne, a familiar fragrance that brought a sense of safety. Everything felt normal, just like any other time he visited. We talked for a bit, and he asked about my studies and how I was finding life at the university. I shared my experiences, grateful for his interest in my life. He seemed genuinely engaged, asking questions about my classes and how I was managing everything. But as the conversation continued, I felt the tiredness growing. My body needed rest, and my mind was beginning to drift. Eventually, I turned to him and said I needed to go lie down for a bit. He gave me a warm smile, nodded understandingly, and told me to go get some rest. There was nothing unusual in his response, nothing that would make me feel any different than I usually did. I stood up, feeling reassured by his kindness, and made my way to my room, eager to unwind and find some relief from the day. Little did I know, my uncle had a secret plan. As I walked into my room, I thought about how lucky I was to have such a caring family. My mother was always there for me, and my uncle always treated me with kindness. I had no reason to worry, but something felt a little off that day. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I ignored the feeling, thinking it was just because I was tired. I changed into my comfortable clothes and sat on my bed, hoping to get some rest. My mind wandered back to the conversation I had with my uncle. He had asked more questions than usual. At first, I thought he was just being friendly, but now, as I lay there, I started to wonder why he seemed so interested in everything I did. I was on my period, and it felt like my body was acting differently than usual. Sometimes, it made me feel restless, and my thoughts would drift in strange directions. It was as if my body had its own ideas about what it wanted, especially during those days of the month. I often felt a strange mix of emotions and didn't quite know how to handle them. Back then, during my time in boarding school, life got a lot more complicated. Being surrounded by so many other girls meant I was always hearing new ideas and experiences. It felt like there was a never-ending stream of conversations about everything, including our periods. My friends talked about it so openly, as if it was just another part of life. As my friends shared their personal tips and experiences, they made everything sound so normal, so effortless, that I couldn't help but feel intrigued. Sitting together in the dormitory, surrounded by laughter and animated expressions, I listened as they shared their thoughts about their periods. They giggled, exchanging stories about what they did to handle the cravings and the mood swings that often came with that time of the month. One of them mentioned something they called a doodle that helped them satisfy themselves whenever their bodies felt a certain way. "With this, we need no man," she declared confidently, a playful grin lighting up her face. The others cheered in agreement, and I watched as they continued to talk openly, explaining how they had learned to rely on themselves to meet their own needs. They shared little secrets, and for them, this wasn't taboo or embarrassing, it was something empowering. I couldn't help but admire the way they spoke about it, with confidence and pride in their voices. As they continued sharing, another friend chimed in, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "It's like a little adventure you can have whenever you want." Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself listening even more intently as they described the ways they explored their own bodies and learned what made them feel good. They spoke about it like it was a natural, even fun part of life, something every girl should discover for herself. At first, I felt a bit shy and hesitant, unsure if I could relate to what they were describing. It seemed like such a bold thing to do, something I'd never really thought about in such a way. But as the conversation unfolded, and I saw how much they valued their self-discovery, I felt a growing curiosity inside me. I wanted to understand what they were talking about and to learn why it meant so much to them. They talked about using their hands or even certain objects to help them feel calm and relaxed, especially when things felt overwhelming or when emotions ran high. To them, it was like unlocking a secret door to a world where they could find comfort and happiness on their own terms. Every story they shared opened my eyes to the idea that knowing and caring for our own bodies is an essential part of feeling strong and empowered. They spoke with a level of self-assurance that made me see this part of life as a powerful and personal experience. The idea that we didn't need anyone else, let alone a man, to feel satisfied and fulfilled felt so liberating to me. For the first time, I began to see how I could explore my own emotions and desires, understanding myself in a new light. I realized that there was so much more to learn, so much more about myself waiting to be discovered. These conversations inspired me to think about my own journey, about how I could take that first step towards knowing what makes me feel good, confident, and completely myself. The conversations inspired me, and I realized that I wanted to embrace that same freedom. It was all about discovering myself and finding comfort in my own skin. So, as I listened to their laughter and stories, I felt a sense of excitement bubbling inside me. I knew I had a lot to learn, but I was ready to explore my own path, just like my friends had done. One day after school, I decided to ask one of my friends about it. "What's doodle?" I whispered, feeling nervous but curious. She smiled and explained that it was a way some girls found comfort during their periods. She told me how it could help with those strange feelings that sometimes came out of nowhere. I listened intently, intrigued by her words. My friend encouraged me to try it if I ever felt curious or restless. "It's just for you," she said. "You can explore your body and find out what feels good." I wasn't sure if I was ready for that, but a part of me wanted to understand. The idea lingered in my mind like a mystery waiting to be solved. When I was in school, I finally decided to try using the doodle. I was both nervous and excited, not really knowing what to expect. I remembered all the conversations I had with my friends and how they described the pleasure it could bring. So, one afternoon when I had some time to myself, I took a deep breath and gave it a go. As soon as I began, I was taken aback by how natural and comforting the experience felt. The pleasure was so overwhelming, almost like a wave washing over me, easing away every ounce of stress and tension I had been carrying. I couldn't help but smile as I felt the relaxation taking over, allowing me to let go of all the restlessness that had been building up inside. It was like discovering something profoundly personal and freeing. This was a part of myself I had never truly explored, and now that I had, I realized it was something valuable, something I could cherish and revisit whenever I needed. From that moment on, using the doodle became my own private ritual, a little secret that I carried close to my heart. Even after I left home and moved to university, the comfort it brought stayed with me. I found solace in knowing I had a way to bring myself peace whenever I felt the familiar discomforts of my period approaching. It wasn't just about relief. It was a part of my routine, a way of caring for myself and giving myself something to look forward to during those challenging days. Now, as I found myself experiencing my period once again, I was determined to embrace that familiar comfort. I recalled the times in the past when it had brought me such joy and peace, and I was eager to relive those moments. I found a quiet moment in my dorm room, carefully ensuring I had complete privacy, and began to prepare myself mentally and physically for the experience. My heart raced in anticipation, my body tingling at the thought of what was to come. As I settled in, I felt a blend of excitement and warmth wrap around me like a blanket. I closed my eyes, letting my mind wander back to the sensations I had felt before, allowing myself to fully immerse in the moment. This was my time, an opportunity to unwind, to release any tension, and to experience a pleasure that was uniquely mine. I let myself explore, feeling every sensation fully, savoring the freedom and joy of the moment. It was a space I had created just for myself, a time to embrace the pleasure that was all mine, free from judgment or expectation. Every time I explored my body this way, I discovered something new about myself. It was exciting, and it gave me a sense of freedom that I had never experienced before. Since I started using it, I realized that I didn't really need a boyfriend to feel happy or fulfilled. At first, I thought it might be bad to be so focused on my own pleasure, especially since many of my friends were dating or talking about their crushes. They often joked about needing a boyfriend for certain things, but I felt content with what I had found. I felt like I was in control of my own happiness. Sure, there were moments when I wondered if I was missing out on something by not having a boyfriend. I saw my friends sharing sweet moments with their partners, and I thought maybe it would be nice to experience that kind of connection. But then, I remembered the joy I felt during my private moments. I realized I was perfectly fine without a boyfriend for now. This was my time to discover who I was and what made me feel good. I was learning to love myself, and that felt like a powerful thing. I enjoyed these moments alone, and they brought me a sense of comfort and peace. I knew that my journey of self-discovery was just beginning, and I was excited to explore more about myself without worrying about what anyone else thought. After I had satisfied myself, a deep sense of relaxation washed over me. I lay down on my bed, feeling utterly content, with a gentle smile lingering on my face. Letting my body sink into the soft mattress, I relished the calm that followed a long, demanding day at university. My eyes drifted closed as the quiet of the room enveloped me like a cozy blanket. I felt at peace, as if all the weight of the day had finally lifted. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Just as I was on the verge of sleep, a soft knock suddenly broke the silence, pulling me back to full awareness. Startled, I quickly sat up, my heart beginning to race as I tried to make sense of the unexpected sound. Who could it be at this hour? I wasn't expecting any visitors, and it seemed odd that anyone would come by so late. I sat still, listening closely, hoping that it might have been my imagination. Then the knock came again, this time more pronounced but still gentle, urging me to get up and answer. With a mix of curiosity and unease, I stood up, made my way to the door, and opened it. To my surprise, it was my uncle standing there, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. There was something strange in his eyes, something I'd never noticed before. A faint chill ran down my spine, and an uneasy feeling settled over me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself that everything was probably fine, just as it always had been. Forcing my voice to sound casual, I asked, "Are you okay?" My heart, however, betrayed my calm tone, beating faster with each passing second. I studied his face, searching for a hint of why he was here so late or what might have prompted this unusual visit. But as I looked into his eyes, that unsettling feeling only grew stronger. There was something off, something in his gaze that made me instinctively uncomfortable, a quiet alarm sounding in the back of my mind. He glanced around the room, almost as if he was searching for something. "Yeah, I'm fine," he replied, though his voice sounded a bit too casual for my liking. He took a step closer, and I felt a flutter of anxiety. I shifted on my bed, trying to keep the conversation light despite the growing tension in the air. "What brings you here?" I asked, trying to keep my tone friendly, even as I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. I noticed how he kept his gaze on me, studying me in a way that felt different from the usual uncle-niece relationship. "I just wanted to check on you," he said slowly, his voice low. "I hadn't seen you in a while." There was something unsettling about the way he spoke. It felt too serious, too intense for a simple visit. I wanted to brush it off, to believe he was just being a caring uncle, but my instincts told me otherwise. I forced a smile, hoping it would ease the tension between us. "I'm fine, really, just relaxing," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. But deep down, I felt a strange mixture of confusion and unease. Why was he here now? What was that look on his face? My mind raced with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was a shift in his demeanor, an intensity in his gaze that I hadn't seen before. It felt as though he was silently conveying something I wasn't prepared to understand, something that made me instinctively wary. His eyes lingered on me, holding a strange energy, as if he was thinking of moving closer, perhaps even joining me on the bed. I swallowed hard, feeling my pulse quicken with discomfort. The way he was looking at me wasn't like the familiar, caring glance of a family member. It was different, and it sent a shiver down my spine. It felt as though he was trying to communicate something unspoken, a desire that made me feel uneasy. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, that I was misinterpreting things. But deep down, I knew that this look, this feeling, wasn't normal. It was out of place, and it filled the air with a tension so thick, I could almost feel it pressing down on me. Shifting uncomfortably, I tried to break the tension that hung between us, lingering like a heavy fog. "Is there something you want to talk about?" I asked, my voice coming out slightly shaky despite my attempt to sound composed. I hoped that steering the conversation towards something innocent would help dissolve the discomfort. He hesitated, as if struggling with something unspoken, his expression shifting between the familiar warmth of an uncle and something darker, something that unsettled me even more. "I just wanted to see how you were doing, that's all," he replied, but the words felt heavy, loaded with a meaning I couldn't quite grasp. The weight of his response sent another surge of anxiety through me, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I forced myself to hold his gaze. I wanted to tell him that the way he was looking at me made me uncomfortable, that I valued the boundary between us and didn't want it blurred. But the words felt trapped, caught somewhere between my heart and my lips. Instead, I fidgeted with the edge of my blanket, trying to ground myself. I thought back to all the times my uncle had been kind and supportive. It felt hard to reconcile that person with the one standing before me now. "I'm fine, really, just studying and relaxing," I repeated, hoping to push away the growing unease. But even as I spoke, I could see the glimmer of something in his eyes, a hint of an unspoken desire that made me want to retreat further into myself. I wished I could just close the door again, create some distance, and remind myself that I was safe in my own space. Before I knew it, he stepped closer to me, and my heart sank as he said, we should have some fun together." The words hung in the air, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I wanted to back away, to put some space between us, but my body felt frozen in place. As he moved in, I could hardly breathe. I was caught off guard, and before I could respond, he leaned in and pressed his lips against my chest. A chill ran through me, and I felt a rush of confusion and fear. This wasn't the kind of fun I had imagined, and I realized that I was in a situation I never wanted to be in. I pushed him away gently, trying to maintain my composure. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me, anger, fear, and a deep sense of betrayal. This wasn't how family was supposed to act. I had always trusted him, and now that trust felt shattered. His expression shifted in a way I hadn't seen before, and for a split second, something unfamiliar flickered across his face, perhaps surprise, frustration, or even something darker, something unsettling. He took another step forward, and with a casual tone that felt completely out of place, he said, "Come on, don't be like that." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication, as he tried once more to close the distance between us. It was as though he thought he could dismiss my unease, as if my hesitation was just a minor inconvenience. At that moment, my heart began to race faster, a surge of adrenaline mixed with anxiety flooding through me. I realized with striking clarity that I had to stand my ground, to assert my boundaries. I couldn't let this situation spiral any further. My voice shook, but I steadied it as best as I could. "This isn't right," I said firmly, meeting his gaze despite the tremor in my voice. "You can't do this, you're my uncle." The words felt monumental, as though I was pulling them from the deepest part of myself, summoning every ounce of strength and determination I had. I saw his demeanor shift, faltering ever so slightly. The impact of my words seemed to reach him, if only for a moment. Sensing the need for space, I instinctively took a step back, feeling the reassuring solidity of the wall behind me. It was as if the wall itself lent me strength, grounding me, reminding me that I had every right to hold my ground. If you're still tuned into this video and find the story inspiring, drop a 2 in the comments to let me know you're still with me. In that moment, something profound stirred within me, a surge of determination and self-protection I hadn't known I possessed. I wouldn't let him manipulate or take advantage of me, no matter how much he tried to downplay or twist the situation. This was my space, my sanctuary, and I had the right to feel safe in it. I would defend that right, no matter what it took. "Please leave my room," I said, my voice steadier now, the words carrying a quiet, unshakable resolve despite the fear coursing through me. I knew I had to stay strong, even though my heart was pounding so loudly I could feel it in my throat. This moment wouldn't define me or compromise my sense of security. This was my space, my sanctuary, and I would not let it be tainted. The thought of the peaceful time I had just spent alone grounded me further. Not long before he knocked, I had taken a moment to reconnect with myself, finding comfort and joy in my own company. It had been a time of complete peace, a private experience of self-discovery and contentment. I had finally let go of the stresses of the day, fully relaxed in my own presence, feeling at one with myself. That moment had been just for me, a sacred, untroubled space of solace and release. Now, here he was, intruding on that quiet joy, threatening to shatter the tranquility I had worked so hard to find. I was unwilling to let anything disturb that feeling, unwilling to let anyone take away the sense of safety I had created for myself. As he continued to stand there, his expression a mix of frustration, something that hinted at disappointment, I held my ground, refusing to yield. I could see the confusion in his eyes, perhaps even the beginnings of anger or frustration, but I didn't care. I had every right to feel the way I did. This was my body, my mind, my space, and my choice. I wasn't going to let anyone else define it, control it, or undermine it. As I said, "Please leave," I reiterated, my voice more insistent. I wanted him to know I was serious. This wasn't a negotiation, it was a boundary, a firm line he could not cross. Standing there, I could feel my own strength, an inner resolve that had taken root and grown in this moment. I wouldn't allow his disappointment, his reaction, to overshadow the clarity and certainty I had about my own boundaries. Look, I'm just not in the mood, I added firmly, hoping he'd understand I was resolute. This is my space, my sanctuary, and I need you to respect that. As the silence stretched between us, I saw him wrestling with his own emotions, struggling to accept that I wasn't going to bend. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy, a small voice wondering if he was hurt, but I reminded myself that my well-being came first. I had to prioritize my sense of safety, my peace, and my boundaries. I hope you understand, I added, softening my tone slightly. It's just not the right time for me. He sighed, disappointment etched across his face, but I held firm. This moment, this experience, wasn't his to disrupt. I felt empowered in that moment, knowing that I had defended what mattered to me, that I had chosen my own feelings and comfort above all else. As he finally began to turn away, a wave of relief washed over me. I knew that from this moment forward, would always prioritize my sense of self, my own boundaries, and my inner peace above anyone else's expectations or desires. When I saw the disappointment in his eyes, it lingered like a weight in the air, tugging briefly at my emotions. For a moment, it almost felt as though I should feel guilty, as if I had done something to hurt him, someone who had once been a trusted figure in my life. That look, that hint of sadness and frustration, stirred a familiar impulse to sympathize, to reach out and make things right. But as soon as that instinct arose, I knew I couldn't allow it to take hold. This situation was different, this was a boundary that couldn't be crossed, not even for him. I reminded myself, firmly and clearly, that I had every right to feel the way I did. This wasn't about his disappointment, it was about my autonomy, my personal space, and my right to control what happened within it. My body was mine, my choices were mine, and no one had the right to dictate what I should feel or what I should want. He could be disappointed, he could be frustrated or even angry. But I would not allow his reaction to undermine the sense of peace and self-respect I had just fought to establish. As he stood there, the disappointment etched on his face giving way to a mix of confusion and frustration, it became even clearer to me that this moment wasn't about him, it was about me. In that moment, I made a choice, a deliberate decision to place my needs, my feelings, and my boundaries above any expectations he might have held. I had no obligation to meet his needs or fulfill his unspoken wishes, and I wouldn't allow myself to feel pressured or responsible for his emotions. I'm not in the mood, I stated, the words ringing with a quiet but resolute strength. I felt every syllable anchoring me in my choice, reinforcing the wall I was building to protect my inner peace. I wanted him to know, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was not an object, not something he could claim or control at will. I was a person, and this was my space, my sanctuary. My sanctuary, I reminded myself, a place where I should feel safe, respected, and at ease. And in that moment, I needed him to respect that sanctuary just as much as I did. The room fell into a heavy silence, my words settling between us as he seemed to struggle to process them. His expressions flickered, shifting from disbelief to frustration, as though he were wrestling with the refusal, trying to find a way around it. Watching him, a small part of me felt a trace of pity, a fleeting thought of compassion for his struggle. But I quickly reminded myself of the importance of putting myself first, of protecting my own well-being before worrying about anyone else's feelings. This wasn't a time for empathy or sympathy. This was a time for self-preservation. I held my gaze steady, refusing to let my resolve falter. I was entitled to say no, to stand up for my own boundaries, to protect my feelings and desires. This wasn't just about keeping him out of my space, it was about affirming my right to decide who was welcome within it, about safeguarding the inner peace I had worked so hard to create. "I hope you understand," I said, adding a soft edge to my voice, more to reinforce my decision than to soothe him. I wanted him to hear the finality in my words. "It's just not the right time for me." I watched him absorb my words, his face still a mixture of emotions, disappointment, frustration, perhaps even a hint of wounded pride. His sigh was heavy, filled with unspoken thoughts, but I held my ground. I wasn't going to budge, wasn't going to give in to the unspoken pressure to accommodate his feelings over my own. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected: pride. I was proud of myself for standing up, for holding firm to what I knew was right for me, for asserting my own needs and refusing to be swayed by someone else's expectations. I could feel the empowerment surging within me, a quiet but fierce strength that reminded me I could trust myself, that I could prioritize my own comfort, my own choices, above all else. I knew, in that single powerful moment, that this decision marked a turning point for me. I would no longer allow anyone to compromise my sense of self or invade my space with their desires or expectations. This was my life, my body, and my choice. And that realization, that fierce, empowering commitment to myself, felt like a victory. A victory no one could take from me, a victory that would remind me to always place my well-being and self-respect first, no matter what. As we reach the end of this story, we're left with powerful reflections on personal boundaries, self-discovery, and the courage to stand up for oneself. What did you take away from this experience? Comment below on one thing you've learned and will bring to practice in your own life. If you enjoyed this video, please share your thoughts, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your engagement helps us continue bringing impactful stories to life. Thank you for watching.